Gentlemen, welcome back to this live edition of the True Life Podcast. We got the one and only Dr. David Solomon. More David Solomon. Everyone's always yelling this. Live from Oxford, Dr. David Solomon. How are you, my friend? What's going on
That's
over there?
right. I'm doing okay. I'm over here in England with a group of 16 students on a study abroad trip. We are doing a London museums is our topic. So we've been doing museums. We've been here. It was a week ago. Today's Monday, right?
Yeah.
You lose track of the time. Yeah, we flew out of Washington a week ago today. So we got in Tuesday morning. And I came out to Oxford today to check some things out here. And it's a fantastic city, a beautiful day. And been having a great time.
Wow. What a great trip to do, to get to see the looks on students' faces, to get to be immersed in a whole different culture, albeit somewhat
Yeah.
similar, but a
Yeah.
different culture. And so
No,
what
definitely. I think probably I can never get the numbers straight, but at least half of them have never been abroad. Some of them had never flown before because of COVID.
right?
All the high school trips that they normally would have taken were canceled. So these kids are mostly freshmen, rising sophomores, and rising juniors. I think we may have a couple of seniors, and it's a build off of my work in the museum studies program that we do here, there at Christopher Newport University, and and so we're doing a course on London museums and the preservation of knowledge, looking at the ways in which various institutions, museums, and also historic sites deal with preserving our cultural memory. So I went to the Ashmolean Museum here in Oxford. That's why we came out here today. And I think it's been the highlight actually of the entire trip for me. Ashmolean is the first public museum in Britain. It was opened in the late 17th century, and it had been redesigned not that long ago. It had been redesigned since I'd been there, and I was floored by the redesign. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous museum now, with a beautiful collection that's on display and just really just brilliantly curated. And the amazing thing about most of these museums in England is they're free. The government subsidizes them. They want people to have access. And as a result, you see folks from all walks of life in these places because that's the goal.
Are there people protesting outside all the museums?
Not all of them. Some. There are some controversies about funding,
Yeah.
specifically in London with BP,
Mm.
British Petroleum, which is a big funder of several museums, including the British Museum and the Science Museum in particular. And there's been a lot of pushback and folks wanting them to get out. Um, so I mean that's an ongoing discussion. The bigger issue at the moment here in the UK is that the current government is very hot on defunding the
Mm.
arts and defunding culture. So the fact that these museums are free is not a permanent thing. They could turn into pay situations if the government does the kind of funding slashing that they're trying to do. They've been somewhat successful already. They've had a few significant failures. They were going to defund the part of the BBC orchestra and also the BBC singers, and there was such incredible blowback that they pulled that back. So they are listening, I think, to people. But the amazing thing is that today is a Monday. It's not a bank holiday in the UK, and Oxford is just filled with people, tourists, but also native Brits and many school groups, British school groups, who are here. And we were talking with my students about that, about the differences between education in the U.S. and education in the UK. They were asking us about this. It was very kind of interesting because we were talking about the fact that the British history is built into the curriculum in this country. And so you really don't meet anybody who is really unaware or ignorant of their own history. And I'm talking about going back to the founding of the country, and which dates to ancient times. And we don't have the same kind of curriculum. I mean, we always decry that Americans don't know their own history. And here you don't find that. I mean, you could ask anybody pretty much here who's gone through the British system anything about their history, and they'll know. It's really quite impressive. The other thing that has really struck my students is how, I guess, literate is the best way that I can put it. The culture is here. One of my students was marveling the other day when we got off the tube. She said, "I saw a 12-year-old kid sitting on the tube reading a newspaper." She says, "I've never seen that before in my life." And he wasn't just looking at it; he was reading the newspaper. She said he was actually like engaged what he was looking at. And I said, "Yeah, a very different culture. I mean, you've got to remember, London still has, I don't know how many daily newspapers. It's really mind-boggling, and they're available everywhere. And the U.S. in most large cities, if they have one or two daily newspapers, that's probably still holding on. But try to find them to purchase them, not so easy. They even have in London, of course, they have an evening paper still, the Evening Standard, which is actually free. They hand it out when you're getting on the tube at night.
Wow.
It's very, very different. I was thinking about that this morning because my hotel gets, I don't know, 4 or 5 newspapers every morning that they have in the lobby. And I was looking at one of them the other day, I forget which one it was, and the cover price is 80p, 80 pence, which is about let's say $1.25 American. I think the New York Times cover price right now is over $3 every day. That's just such a difference. I'm talking a lot here, but I mean, continuing on with that idea of it being a literate culture. I mean, I was just in Blackwell's, which is one of the biggest bookstores in the country.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, amazing bookstore. And when I walked into it, they have a sign hanging up that says they are the knowledge retailer. That's how they present themselves. And as you walk through that bookstore, it's just amazing because you just think, now granted, we're in Oxford University is here, but just the breadth of what this bookstore carries on its shelves is just astonishing. They didn't have my book, but I figure it must be sold out.
Right.
But naturally. But really just amazing. And of course the book culture in this country is still alive and well. The print culture is still alive and well. You encounter people reading all over the place and reading literature. It's quite a difference.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating to me. How many different museums is your group going to go to throughout the whole trip?
I should have counted. We're here for 2 weeks.
Okay.
We are seeing on average 2 a day. And some days we're seeing 3 or 4, depends on where we are in the city. So for example, yesterday, and the days are starting to blur together, so you have to forgive me. Yesterday morning, how were we yesterday morning? In the afternoon, we went to the Imperial War Museum, which was very striking and intense, more intense than I had expected it to be. Very, very well done. Large exhibit on World War I, large exhibit on World War II, a very, very affecting and effective exhibit on the Holocaust. And it just a really, really very striking museum. And again, that museum is free to get into. So we did that yesterday afternoon, and for the life of me, I can't remember where we were yesterday morning because it's all starting to blend together. But I mean, so far we've been here a week. We've been to the British Museum, we've been to the Victoria and Albert Museum, the Natural History Museum, the Science in London, War Museum, the Wellcome Collection, the Wallace Collection, and probably some other things that I'm just not remembering. and a lot more to come next week. On next week, we will split. My colleague will take some students to Greenwich, and I will take students to Kensington, where they will see Kensington Palace, the Queen's Gallery in Buckingham, the Princess Diana Memorial, and we will go to the Serpentine Gallery that day as well. So we're doing quite a lot. Yeah, where the hell were we yesterday? We were. That's really something I can't remember. Oh, somebody's done something interesting. Not me. But yeah, so quite a bit. I mean, the way we have it structured, we leave every morning by 8. We're on the tube going wherever we're going. We go all day, and we pretty much leave the students to have the evenings to themselves.
Is it now? Some of your students are actually doing different, doing courses where they learn to curate museums and stuff. So I would imagine that what they're learning is quite a bit more than just seeing all the stuff in there. They're actually learning how things are working, kind of behind the scenes.
Sure.
How is that working?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the reasons for doing this. About 3/4 of the students who are in the group are doing our museum studies program. And so this course counts towards their requirements. And it's been quite interesting because one of the topics that I deal with when I teach my course is talking about conservation and the way that items are conserved and also preserved. And at the Victoria and Albert Museum the other day, we had a really nice lecture about the way that the V&A does conservation on their textiles collection. And at the Ashmolean today, basically the entire bottom level was about the way that the Ashmolean does conservation. And it was so well done. I was just really blown away.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about all the different history, and not only what you can learn by taking a tour through the culture and the museums, but to learn how in which they present things to you. Is there a course of lectures that you guys are getting at those museums as well?
Yes, we have talks every day. We do a lecture every morning when we get to the site, and then we have students present. They do short presentations themselves on each site. So we have an overview lecture each day. They love dogs here; they're everywhere. We have an overview lecture every day when we go over some history, some cultural issues about food and language, right, and architecture. And then we have the students do about a 10-minute presentation about the site that we're going to that day. And students have worksheets every day then that they have to complete. So we don't want them being bogged down, but we want to make sure they see things that they should see. So they have a kind of a checklist of the must-sees in each of the locations that they have to go to and fill out these worksheets to help them complete them. So, you know, in the morning yesterday we were at the National Gallery. How can I forget that? National Gallery. Because it was amazing. I mean, the collection at the National Gallery is just unbelievable. The collection of Italian Renaissance art.
Oh, man.
2 Da Vinci's, the Virgin of the Rocks is there. Loads of Titians and Rubens, and just some of these paintings that are so iconic that you recognize them as soon as you see them, and you go, "Oh my God, that's it! I'm standing in front of it." And with most of them, we don't have a real sense of the size. Most of them are tremendous pieces. They're huge paintings. And the nice thing, of course, about seeing them in person is you can walk right up and, you know, really look at detail and see brush strokes and see the paint on the canvas. It's really quite an experience. And that's really the goal of doing a study abroad trip like this, is to get that experience. You could see all of these pieces online, right? You could see them online and never have to leave home. But there's something different about the experience of traveling, of coming to the country, of seeing the pieces, you know, in situ where they live. And then also, you know, for our purposes, because of what I teach, you know, looking at the whole idea of the museum and the way that they present things, the way that they lay things out, the shops. We even do, you know, how accessible it is. The whole thing on accessibility. Are there bathrooms that are easy to find, et cetera, et cetera. And some of them we have done a fantastic job with some of those issues, and many are still far behind. There are several that we've gone into which are clearly not accessible to folks who aren't fully able. And my students have been struck by that, and so we had to have a discussion almost the first day about the fact that there is no, Britain does not have an ADA. There's no Americans with Disabilities Act here, so most buildings are not required to be accessible. And as a result, because some of these structures are, literally 300 and 400 years old, they haven't been retrofitted so that they have accessibility. Although once you're out on the street, that is quite different. I mean, I noticed as I was walking through Oxford earlier, and I'm sitting here outside Balliol. Oh, I think I lost. Am I there?
You're there now, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And they're actually small ramps about every 40 feet, so that you could roll a wheelchair up the curb and get onto the curb. So they're very conscious of that. They are about every 40. Sorry about
Nice.
that.
That's okay. I'm curious. To you, as someone who's been able to travel a little bit, what's it like to get to see not only the amazing museums and the pieces, but the looks on the children's, they're not children, the looks
Yeah.
on the student's face when they see that stuff for the first time?
Yeah.
That has to be a pretty cool experience as well.
It is. It is. It's a real charge. There are a lot of intricacies to doing something like this,
Right.
especially with students who haven't been abroad before.
Right.
So we spend several weeks meeting them ahead of time. We met in the spring semester over the course of 3 weeks to do some prep work, and then because yesterday morning was sort of our halfway point, we had a meetup in our hotel lobby in the morning, and I said, we're about halfway through, and some of you are getting homesick, and some of them nodded. And I said, and some of you are also getting to be kind of lackadaisical. You're like, yeah, I got this. I'm here now. It's like, but you don't know the culture. You don't know the social cues. Don't get cocky. That's when you get things stolen. You've got to watch your stuff. We're in a big city. But yes, having them see things. I mean, we were at the Wallace collection the other day, and the Wallace collection includes a famous painting called The Swing. I forget who the artist is. And a couple of my students, they know these paintings from their art history classes. And, when they saw it, they were just over the moon. Oh my God, there it is, because it's one of their favorites. There's a school group back here taking a picture. Yeah, it is really, the other day we were in Trafalgar Square, and we walked up to Westminster and to the Houses of Parliament. We're actually going to go into Westminster next week, and they were, as soon as they see Big Ben, of course, they're all, oh my God, that's funny, because a couple of them stopped me and said, stupid question, is that Big Ben? Because they're used to seeing it on pictures, and then you see it in person, it's like, oh my God, that's it. So yeah, it is quite interesting to experience that, and that's one of the other benefits of doing a study abroad trip as a professor is getting to share that with your students.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be very rewarding, especially as you said, you've got to kind of lead up to it all year and see it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, we've been
there.
planning this trip since last September. By Christmas, so they've been waiting. Sorry, I keep dropping out here. They've been waiting a long time, so they've been real happy that they're finally here and getting to experience it all.
Right. Have you been able to find your way into any like kind of smaller bookstores, like a little boutique bookstore that may find
A
find
few.
you some treasures?
There aren't a tremendous number of those left in London. A lot
Mhm.
of those are outside the city.
I see.
There are a couple here in Oxford that I've been in, and there are a few still in London. I'm actually planning on going over there Wednesday, I believe. Wednesday night, I'm meeting someone for dinner, and I'm going to go over Charing Cross Road, which is the famous road that used to be just lined with bookstores. Still has some left. It's not what it was. But the big store that's there is Foyles. Foyles is sort of the Barnes and Noble of Britain, and
Ah.
that's their flagship stores there. And it's a tremendous bookstore. I think it's something like 5 or 6 floors. It's just a huge bookstore. But there are, it's still a smattering of used bookstores here and there, and some antiquarian bookstores that specialize in high-end things. In fact, in Blackwell's, they have an antiquarian section. I walked back there, and if you want to wire me that £1,700, I will bring you back a nice gift. So.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. It seems fascinating to me to get to be there in that sort of position where you get to not only see everything, not only to get to show the students the museums, but also to get to, play a part in a part of their lives that they'll remember forever. Is there a certain
Definitely.
particular museum that you're coming up on that you're really excited about?
Um, for the rest of this, I mean, I'm looking forward very much to going to the Serpentine Gallery. The Serpentine Gallery is near Buckingham Palace and is a famous gallery. So I'm looking forward to that. My lead up was to the Ashmolean, which I saw today, and it did not disappoint. So trying to see if I can turn my camera around here so I can show you
Yeah,
what's going on here. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Of course, I am. Oh, wait a minute. Bear with me a sec.
sure.
If I can do that. Can I do that in Stream? Um, I'm going to just turn my
Yeah, go
phone
for it.
around here so you can
Oh,
sort
there
of
we
see
go.
I can't get it to turn around, but that's Balliol College straight across,
Okay.
and then Trinity College is right up there,
Oh,
and then up
nice.
the road about 10.
Well, it looks like we've had some technical difficulties here. However, if we bear with us, you might be able to get yourself a shot of some
Yeah,
of
I'm
the
losing
beautiful
you.
scenery.
Oh, can you
There we
see
go.
it? Oh, you can
Now
see it now. Am I back
okay,
here? Yep.
you're
Sorry
back
about.
now. That's okay.
So yeah, up the road that way, about 100 yards is the Bodleian Library, which is the most famous in the West. Really, just an amazing library that has manuscripts and books going back to
Mm.
as far as the written word has been around. I don't know if you got to see across the street. Did I lose you then? So there's
Yeah, I got to
Balliol
see the
College.
Trinity. Yep. Yep.
Yep, Trinity is up there, and then down this way. So I mean, Oxford is you can tell it's a beautiful, beautiful city, and it's been absolutely perfect the whole time we've been here. It's just been amazing. It's cool and it's dry and it's just fantastic. I've been here when it's been unbelievably hot. It's pretty awful because, of course, they don't have air conditioning in most of these buildings because they're 300 years old,
Right.
and so it
Yeah,
could be
it's
pretty
in.
steamy in there when the weather's bad.
I can imagine. It must be pretty also enlightening and beautiful to see all the different architecture since the buildings are so old.
Yeah.
Is that something that the kids are checking or the students are checking out?
Yes. Yeah, we talk about some aspect of architecture each day with them. I've talked about Roman or Georgian or neoclassical,
Mm.
depending on where we're going, because the buildings usually fit that period. Talk about how they came about. We were at Westminster Abbey outside the other day and talking about the fact that there's only one section of Westminster that's medieval, that's original. The
Mm.
rest of it burned down and was rebuilt, and it's rebuilt in classical style. So I mean, it was rebuilt to kind of look medieval, but it's not. It actually was done in the 1800s. So it's the front section of it, the long front section, that is the original section, which inside has one of the best examples hammered buttress roof, which is the roof that looks like an upside down boat. You can see
Uh,
the like a hull in the roof.
as for with such an extensive background in like medieval mysticism, is there any sort of museum or architecture or something that has to do with the medieval mystics that you guys are excited to see over there?
Yeah, not as much in London. You
Right.
have to get out of London and go to the smaller towns to see that, because most of the folks that we know as part of the mystical tradition were not in the city.
Uh,
Probably the closest thing is if we were to go to, which we're not, to Canterbury. And I've been wanting to do a course on Canterbury where we actually retrace the steps and do the pilgrimage. Canterbury's about an hour and a half away by train. But you could, retrace the steps of the pilgrims in the Canterbury Tales, which would be kind of fun, and go to Canterbury Cathedral. But yeah, we for this trip in particular, other than today venturing out of London, we're entirely in the city, and of course, Oxford, where I am, was the home of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, and there's all sorts of Harry Potter stuff here, of course, and umpteen films have been shot here, so much so that there's a book about film locations in Oxford that you can pick up.
That's interesting. When you go there every year, do you get new footage that will help the following class, or maybe the following year students understand what the trip's going to be like, or are you recording it for value that
Not
way?
really, not really, because we want them to experience it
Right.
themselves,
Yeah.
and so we intentionally don't really try to show them a lot ahead of time because we want that they know the major sites, so
Right.
they recognize them like Big Ben and Westminster, and so we really want them to have the experience of seeing them for the first time on their own, and I think that's a significant part of the trip. But we are always kind of scoping out and thinking about what will we do differently the next time and that kind of thing, because we repeat these. Last year we did a trip on King Arthur where we were all over the country.
Mm.
And of course, you and I were supposed to do a podcast from Tintern Abbey, but I got COVID and got stuck in Wales for 5 days with students. Luckily, that has not happened this year and will not happen this year. Things are totally different here now. In fact, I have not seen here in Oxford more than one person wearing a mask. And she was a worker actually at Blackwell's. But yeah, so we did the King Arthur trip last year, and we decided this year, we're just going to stay in London. So we're staying at a hotel in Kensington, and we are there for the whole time, which is really nice to not have to be constantly packing up and moving.
Yeah. What is it that you hope that the students come back with? I mean, obviously they're going to come back with a trip of a lifetime. They've got to see so many beautiful works of art, and they probably got to discover some things about themselves. But what are
Yeah,
some of the things that you hope they come back with?
I think the two things are what you point out. I mean, I first of all, I hope they are going to discover something about themselves.
Yeah.
My colleague who I do these trips with, she is a theater historian, and I mean, she says
Mm.
doing study abroad when she was an undergraduate changed her life. She was here in Oxford and Stratford, and that changed her life. I did not study abroad when I was an undergraduate. We barely had the program because I'm old, and so it wasn't an option. But I would hope that they would discover something about themselves and maybe figure out something that they didn't know, discover something they didn't know about themselves. Oh, I like to travel because for many of them, this is their first time traveling. I have one student who had never been abroad, and I think has rarely been apart from his family. We were in the line to go through TSA at Dulles Airport in Washington, and as we were winding around, the line wound around, and I ended up facing him, and he looked so glum, and I said, "What's up?" I said, "You okay?" And he looked at me and says, "I miss my family." We haven't even left yet. But I get that. These are 19, 20-year-old kids who were still kids.
Yeah.
But so I hope it's going to be something that they're gonna remember and discover something about themselves. The other thing I hope they come back with saying, "I want to go back. That was so great. I want to go back." And not to come home and feel like, oh, I've done that now. I don't have to go back. But to feel like, yeah, I realize because we are, as I said, this is a whirlwind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could come here and spend, at least a week in London and just go to the British Museum every day and still not cover everything. That's why our goal is to give them a flavor of each of the places. And as I say, we have that must-see list. We want to make sure that they're getting what we know they need to get. But also, just about every place that we've been, we go in with the understanding that you're not going to see everything. You're just not going to be able to. It's just too much. We did that with the National Gallery yesterday. The National Gallery, you can sort of look down the middle. It has sort of two pathways that you can take. And so we offered them to them and said, take one or the other. And they said, "Can we do both?" And I said, "Probably not." You're not going to have enough time because we were there for how long we were there. We were there for about 3 hours at the National Gallery, but it was wonderful. I mean, I sat out afterwards, which is just a great location, and have you got me?
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay.
I just lost you for a second there. That's okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I sat in Trafalgar Square for about half. It's experiences like that that you remember. I think I'll always remember my student coming off the tube and saying, "I just saw a 12-year-old kid reading the newspaper," and how shocked she was by that. I think that's a great story,
Yeah.
and a great way to really sort of present, the difference in the cultures.
When the team gets back to school, is there a project that they do that what does that look like?
They're all doing a longer paper. Topic is of their choice. We gave them some parameters. We gave them some broad topics. So, for example, if they wanted to talk about, questions about conservation, different museums and the way they approach that, or the difficult questions, the controversies, right? Looking at the issue of returning stolen artifacts, which is a big issue right now, and how dealing with it. Looking at playing things that are now considered controversial. I was in the science the other day, and they have an exhibit going on right now about milk. It's very well done. I didn't agree with everything that they said as a vegetarian, But it was both a historical view of how country, of how Britain has promoted some of the controversies around that. And they showed that there was one section where there was a video being shown, and there was a shelf label next to it with a warning on it, and it was a very disturbing video. It was a cam that was set up 24/7 after Trump was elected. I wasn't even aware of this. I forget where it was, somewhere in the U.S. And it just filmed people 24/7, and the video that they were showing was a bunch of white supremacists, a bunch of Nazis who had come to the cam, and were, clearly protesting. And as one of their protests, they drank milk out of bottles because, that's pure and it shows purity. And there was a warning next to it that might be disturbing. There were warnings, of course, outside the Holocaust exhibit in the Imperial War Museum. In fact, the sign outside that said that they did not recommend that children under 4, which I thought was awfully young, come through the exhibit because of the disturbing nature. And then there's also the issues about, things that represent and present colonialization and how those are displayed. And I think the understanding that although those things are wrong, although those things should not have occurred, they are part of the history, and it's something that really can't be just ignored. So that's where, the whole question of museum curation and museum administration comes in, which is, well, how do you present that stuff then? How do you present that to the public so that it still remains informational, educational, without being, incredibly offensive and making it seem like you're endorsing that?
Mm-hmm.
Because when it comes down to it, most of these museums are founded, especially in Britain and the history of the empire. I mean, the big joke at the moment, of course, is that, the British Museum, everything that's in it was stolen. And gradually, there are changes going on with returning some things. The British Museum is not one of those places because there are actually laws in the UK that prevent them from doing it. So it's going to take the House of Parliament changing some of those laws to allow these museums to actually return some of those objects. And of course, the two most notable in the British Museum are what are now called the Parthenon marbles. They used to be called the Elgin marbles, but they are no longer referred to that way, which Greece wants back, and the Benin bronzes, which the empire in Africa wants returned. And the Benin bronzes, they have been returning them. Other countries have been returning them, but the UK, it is somewhat hamstrung by the legality of it. Sorry, we're there. By the legality of not being able to return the things, but also by a very kind of odd attitude about it. If listeners want to find out what some of those odd attitudes are, you can YouTube, go on YouTube and put in Benin bronzes, BENIN, and British Museum, and you'll see some interesting news stories about this where, you have native Brits who will say, well, I love the Benin bronzes. I remember seeing them as a kid. It's like, well, sure you do, but they're not yours. They actually are the history of an entirely different people, and they would like their history back because they were stolen by British soldiers.
It's interesting to think about all of that, and you're right. That's such part of the experience for people to learn and to take in, and in some ways, it underscores the complexity that is the human understanding of beauty. Like, this is beautiful, yeah, it's not yours, and it's all wrapped together. And I think that's part of the museum experience. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but it is part of that experience. As we're kind of coming close up on your time a little bit, have you noticed? Over here in the United States, we have this big talk about Chat GPT and AI and how it's infiltrating everything. Do you
Yeah.
see it in the museum space over there?
It was discussed in the Science Museum. It was covered as a very contemporary thing that's happening. And then it was also touched on a bit in the I believe it was in the Welcome collection. So it is in certain places. There was a very odd exhibit in the Ashmolean when I was in there today, which I actually walked out of because it just didn't do anything for me. But it was a contemporary piece that a video artist had put together, and it took the actual diaries of the man who discovered the labyrinths at Gnosis, which is what the overall exhibit was about. And they took his diaries and they did some strange thing with AI and computerized voices and images. And it just, I would rather look at the stuff.
Yeah.
It just didn't, I think there is something to that. And it can't, it's new, right? It's still in its nascent form. And I think that the fear of AI that we have seen in the U.S. in the media, not sure that it's reached the public level here as much yet, although I'm sure it's going to. I have a good friend who actually took me to high tea at the British Museum the other day, which was a lot of fun. And he just retired. His son actually works for Google in people. And he's involved in all of this cutting edge stuff. It's really baffling. I mean, my friend told me, he says, I can't even tell you about some of what he's working with because you're not allowed to. It's security issues. But, both Google, Facebook, and I can't remember what the third one is, have large offices near King's Cross. So they're very present here, to be sure. And that area is quite interesting as a result because it has all those high tech folks working and living in that area. And as a result, there are tons of restaurants because apparently if you do that kind of work, you never eat at home. So they eat takeout and eat out all the time because they also make outrageous salaries that you and I will never see. And it's very expensive as well. It's YouTube and Google, and Facebook.
There you
That's
go.
the three that are right there. Yeah.
Well, David, it's been an incredible time. I'm super thankful.
Show you some pigeons.
Yeah. Hey now.
Getting to the end of the day here. They're starting to scavenge for whatever people left behind.
Yeah, imagine that. Well, as we're coming up on the 45-minute mark,
Yeah.
I know that your battery's probably dying. You probably have students that are looking forward to debriefing, and you probably have some quality time that you'd like to spend with some people you're there with. So before I let you go, is there anything in summation that you want to give to the people or that you want to say in closing?
Thank you for doing this. I mean, it's awfully early where you are in Hawaii, and appreciate you getting up early to do this with me. Glad that we were able to make it happen. And it's nice to be able to share this with other people.
Yeah, I agree. And thank you to you for taking some time out of your schedule, your trip, and the incredible museums to spend time with me and all the listeners here. So send my respect and my thanks to everybody there. Thank you again. I hope you have a great trip. I can't wait to talk to you when you get back. And that's all we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha.
Take care.
Okay, thank you.